Hello, everybody, and welcome to Every Rock Has a Story. Today, I am with Dr. Juliet Sefton, who comes to us from Tufts University, and she's going to share with us, well, kind of a muddy story that I think you will find very interesting, and kind of a rock that I also think you'll find very surprising. So, Juliet, thanks for being here. Tell us about what you brought.
Thanks so much for having me, Ethan. It's very, very exciting to be on Every Rock Has a Story. So, today I've kind of brought you something that many people would say is technically not a rock, but we use it a lot in earth sciences, and that is mud.
Mud.
And this is sticky, smelly, horrible mud with lots of rotten plants inside it. And I'll give you a little taster of what it
So Juliet brought us mud. Where's the mud from?
So this mud is from an island in the Western Pacific, an island called Kosrae, which is part of the Federated States of Micronesia.
Wow.
So what we know about this mud is that it is mangrove mud. And we've also collected it from maybe 10 feet below the ground surface.
So you collected this yourself?
Yes.
In this specific island?
Yep.
How did you get it from 10 feet below the surface?
So I can show you that too. So we brought along a really fun little piece of equipment today. And this is what we would call an auger or a corer. And it's got a little handle on it like this. And what you would do is you would physically push it into the ground, twist it up, and bring up a whole bunch of mud from below your feet.
And so you would have one which was like 10 feet long.
We'd have one that's really, really long.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how we do it. It's a lot of hard work. We have to walk into a pretty sweaty, hot place.
Yeah.
To collect that
Made
mud.
of all this stinky black mud, right?
Exactly. So,
wow.
And the reason why we would want to do that and what kind of story that this mud can tell us is a story about the ocean, but specifically about sea level. And the reason that we want to look at mangrove mud specifically.
What's a mangrove?
So a mangrove is a forest or a swamp that lives right on the coast.
Oh,
so
okay.
It only specifically lives between low tide and high tide. So these are really biodiverse environments.
Yeah,
There's
lots of different biology.
Lots of different animals and creatures and creepy crawlies all hanging out together.
Yeah.
We see lots of crabs. We see lots of spiders sometimes.
Wow.
Which I don't like, but some people
When
do.
you're out there collecting all this, you see these things.
Yeah.
But you were going to tell us about sea level change and how that mud is helping you learn about sea level.
Yeah. So a really important thing to remember to understand this is the present is the key to the past. So we know that mangrove forests, mangrove swamps, they only live between low tide and high tide. So if we find a mangrove mud 10 feet below the ground surface today, then we know that sea level must have been 10 feet lower.
Right.
Because the present, what we know about modern mangroves, is the key to interpreting the past. So we can use a technique that's called radiocarbon, and we know that this mud is about 4,000 years old.
That mud right there, that is 4,000-year-old mud.
Yeah. So we know that 4,000 years ago, sea level was 10 feet lower. And to get to today, the modern ground surface in the mangrove forest, sea level must have been rising. So that's the story that we can tell from this specific piece of mud.
Wow. So now you've got me worried, Juliet. I got to tell you, I'm worried. So 10 feet of sea level rise over the last 4,000 years in Micronesia. What caused that sea level rise?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different processes that can cause sea level to change. I mean, we see it every day. We see, we see waves, we see the tides going in and out, and you can also have, like hurricanes that would bring really big waves, but on really long time scales. So what we're looking at in the geological record, you might think back to the Glaciers Rock episode, which episode?
That's episode 32.
Yeah,
we talked about the melting of the glaciers.
32, the melting of the glaciers, the melting of Antarctica and of Greenland adds more water into the ocean. So if we're adding more water to the ocean, that will cause sea level to rise. That will change sea level in lots of different places. But what you also have to remember is for sea level to change, you have two things to think about. You have the ocean and you have the land. And it's a combination between what the land is doing and what the sea is doing.
Right.
So at this particular island in Micronesia, the land is going down.
Oh.
So the islands themselves are sinking. And the sea, as we know from Glacier's Rock episode, is currently rising as well. So we have the land going down and we have the sea going up.
Yeah.
And that's been happening on these islands for 4,000 years.
Now tell us more about yourself. So why did you decide to work on this? What got you interested in studying mud? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in New Zealand, which is
Wow.
an island, in the South Pacific, a very, very long way from the United States.
True.
And, New Zealand has one of the longest coastlines in the world. And, when you grow up in a place where you have so much coastline, it's impossible to not be super interested in that. And that was kind of I used to spend a lot of time at the beach as a kid growing up. And I guess that's what got me interested in learning about the processes that happen at the beach. But also on a really long time scale. And because I love all sorts of rocks, but I also love the sea, to look at to understand stories about rocks that tell us about the sea.
Yeah.
That's absolutely what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Juliet, thank you so much for coming to Every Rock Has a Story. It's been great having you.
Well, Juliet, I gotta tell you, that was the muddiest episode of Every Rock Has a Story we've ever done. That mud was thick and black, gooey and slimy. Sometimes mud like that even stinks. Whew! But it reminded me of what Danielle told us in episode 49. Remember what she said? Danielle said that every mud has a story. Juliet brought a different kind of mud from a mangrove swamp, and the story that it told was one of rising sea level. I think it's fun to think about Juliet growing up as a child in New Zealand, where she lived on the coastline on the oceans. She got interested in that coastline environment, the rising seas, and what would happen as seas rise between the land and the oceans. Now, Juliet and other scientists are studying the mud from the coastlines to try to predict and understand how fast and how far the seas will rise in our future today. Maybe you'll get interested in studying the science of sea level rise, the science of climate change. Maybe you will be a mud scientist like Juliet as well. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.